Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Healthy University. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I'm here very excited today to talk to my guest, Linda Binns, because we're going to be talking about what it means to be highly sensitive. Linda Binns is an accomplished energy coach and author of 7 self-help books and numerous published articles. She's appeared on television, including her multiple encore guest appearances on Portland, Oregon's AM Northwest news show, as well as on the radio, podcasts, and online summits. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you, Alan. I'm very delighted to be here.
Well, so am I. I think, I've brought it up maybe a couple of times since my discovery that really a lot of what I had been dealing with and experiencing in my life, and in a lot of ways it was negative until I found the positive, until I found it and said, no, this is a positive, was this idea of being highly sensitive and being a highly sensitive person. And then as you make these discoveries, things always happen like this, right? And then you find out, there's been tons of books written and there's websites and there's people like you who actually talk about this often. And it's always so funny how it's for a lot of people, and maybe people listening right now, they've never even heard the term before yet. It's not that new, and it's really an awakening when you discover it. And so through my discovery, it's just been this huge awakening to, this is why I feel the way I do, this is why I act the way I do. It doesn't necessarily solve a lot of things yet, although I've learned to work with it. But what does that mean? What does it mean to be highly sensitive?
Well, essentially, a highly sensitive person has a very different nervous system from everybody else. And it's estimated that about, I would say, 20% of the population is said to be highly sensitive. And I heard a description once, which I thought explained it quite well. Imagine two people looking up at the night sky. And the first person can see a lot of things. They can see the moon and they can see the stars and some planets, and it's really nice. But the second person is looking through a telescope. And so what they see is completely different. It's overwhelming in its beauty and magnificence and all the things that they can see, so much more. But as they're discussing what they're seeing, they're kind of, neither one can really understand the other because they're only seeing their own viewpoint, right? One's seeing so much and the other one seeing not so much. And so that's kind of the person with the telescope. That's a bit like it is to be highly sensitive. So you're picking up, as a highly sensitive person, so much more energy and just experiences. It can be very overwhelming at times. So you're picking up from the environment, you're picking up from the people around you, just everything and everywhere you go. It's like you're this walking antenna. That's what it means to be highly sensitive.
Well, one of the things that I kind of started to equate, so I have like a nephew who has a photographic memory, right? So he remembers, I still remember him at 3 or something, and he got the book of presidents, and he knew all the presidents, and not only them, their vice presidents, and when they were served, and he's always had a photographic memory. But part of what he lost in that was sort of that emotional, right? So he's always struggled with emotions. And I've always told people this, that I feel like I have an emotional memory. So I actually remember details of interesting things. Like I know a lot about music and the songs and the lyrics and the artist and the year it came out. And I used to play this game with people where, on the TV, I grew up in the 80s as an 80s teen. And so the TV could have a song on from the 80s and I could name the artist, the album, and the year it came out within a year. And they're like, how are you doing that? I said, well, I'm actually remembering the place I heard it, where I was, when I heard this song. And that's what I kind of started to equate to this emotional memory and to the high sensitivity.
I really like that. It truly is an emotional experience. We're overloaded with with emotion, if you like, because what we're picking up from everywhere, it's more on an emotional level. You're absolutely right. I like that description.
Right. And it's interesting because the things that have attracted me, things like movies and television, and I was a big comic book reader, and all of these things. And what I tell people, particularly with music, is I'm touched emotionally by lyrics. It's not that I don't like music, the music in the music, but it's like the things they were saying I was relating to. And even in comic books, because I was dealing with bullying, it's interesting now that comic books are these big movies, but if you think about them, Spider-Man was a victim of bullying and then he got his powers. You know, the Hulk, same thing. He was bullied by the government. You know, Captain America was, you know, this guy that was skinny and pipsqueak and couldn't make the military, and then he got powers. And so I used to say, you know, I was very attracted to the feelings that I would get. And the other thing that I noticed about myself, which was more difficult, was that I was more attracted to talking about feelings than, let's say, watching sports. So very unmanly, right? So I suffered the unmanly curse of being when I was younger, but I've found that, you know, that's what I love, and that's, you know, what makes me feel good. It's like you say, you get this energy from people. And I think that's really the difficult thing, is that people don't really always believe we're giving off energy or we're giving off vibes, or you can have a first impression. But the more I've talked about being highly sensitive with other people, the more I realize, yeah, you know, we're more first impression people. Like, your first impression's usually right because you're sensing something.
Right. And like you said, it's more of a feeling thing. It's overwhelmed with emotion. You feel something rather than just, it's not a mental thing as much as a feeling. So for me, for example, certain noises tend to bother me, and and I tell people it's not just the sound. It's not the sound of it. I feel it throughout my body, and it's that really can overwhelm me. So yes, you're absolutely right. It's more of a feeling thing, and it's a particularly hard thing for men, as you say, because you mentioned the word feelings, and everybody wants to shake their heads and roll their eyes, you know, don't want to go there, and it's seen as a weakness if you talk about feelings, or if you are a very sensitive person. But you know what, I found the opposite is true, and the more sensitive you are, your sensitivity is a strength. Highly sensitive people are some of the strongest people I know, because they have to deal with so much.
Yeah, and that is so true, because we have to adapt, and we also have to, you know, I think what's hard when you're young, and this is really the hardest part, I think, of being highly sensitive, is that you don't know, you don't have any coping mechanisms. You haven't yet learned, like, okay, you know, this is the way I can feel, and you know, I've made a joke of it, but it's not really a joke. I've actually had people say to me, "Are you sure you're not gay?" And it's not like they're meaning to be mean. They're just like, well, you talk about feelings and you talk about these things that are unmanly, and to them, that sets this tone of like, you don't really fit in with the other men. But then I've met now other men who, and I wrote an article about it, and I had all these people go, wow, you know, you finally described me. And it's like, that's who I am. And I also mentioned in it that I was an extroverted introvert. So which is another aspect, I think, to high sensitivity, which is this idea that in me is being an extrovert, but it exhausts me, because by the time I'm done, like by the time we're going to be done talking here, I'll be exhausted from that high sensitive energy that I give off. So how do you turn it from that curse? You know, for me, definitely as a child, and I think for a lot of children who are bullied because of it, because for me it was always that I could easily be affected, both positively and negatively. So if someone was attacking me, I would cry, and I really didn't have a lot of control over that. So how do you turn that corner and say, this isn't the curse, when people feel that way, when they feel like, why do I feel so much? I think that was a question I was asking myself all the time. How come I get so upset or so happy or so whatever, and other people aren't? How do we deal with that?
Well, I think the first step is identifying it as you've done, right? It's to recognize, oh, you know what, this applies to me. And then the second step is to identify exactly how does it apply to you. So, there are different levels of sensitivity, and different people are more sensitive to specific things than other people. So I'm very sensitive to certain sounds, certain smells, being in crowds, for example, and that may not affect you. Right. So, and my level of that is different from other people's. So, I have a sensitivity to certain smells like perfumes or chemical smells, and it's uncomfortable. But I know somebody else who she smells something like that, and it can give her a migraine which will last about 3 or 4 days. Right. So there are different levels of the sensitivity. So first is knowing that you are sensitive. Second is understanding the level of sensitivity. And to what is it that affects you? What overstimulates you? And then third, once you know that, is to know what you need to do to take care of yourself. So just as you said, after this interview, even though you may enjoy, the extrovert side of you may enjoy doing an interview and talking to somebody, and that's maybe energizing to you while you're doing it, now that after that interview, you're going to feel drained. So you will need to do something for yourself to recharge your energy, right? So that's the other component is knowing, okay, this is what overstimulates me. Now I need to know what to do to bring myself down, to ground myself again, to make myself feel good again. And then once you understand those things, so what affects you, what you need, then you have to own that, to get comfortable with it, and then you start to be able to articulate what it is that you need to other people. And I don't mean that you have to go out and tell everybody, hey, I'm highly sensitive, and that's not what I mean. What I mean is when you're in a situation where other people may not understand what it is that you need, then you need to explain it to them. So, for example, if I'm, let's say I go to a networking event, or I'm at a conference and I'm with some people that I know, and it's very overstimulating for me. I want to be there, and I want to be with the people I'm with. But now I know what I need. I can say to them, you know what, I'm going to need to go and spend half an hour by myself. It's nothing to do with anybody else. It's just something I need to do to ground myself again. And what I have found is that as I'm able to do that, people really appreciate it, because now they understand. Now they're not left wondering, oh, well, what's wrong with Linda? Why did she need to go off there? Is she okay? Why is she on her own? They're not left wondering. They know, because I've been able to articulate it. And when you can do those things, you really understand it, and you can help other people understand it. It opens up a whole new world, because then you can start connecting with the gift side of being a highly sensitive person, rather than just having to deal with the challenging side of it.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of us fall into these helper roles. Like, we want to be helpers, right? Because I think the biggest thing that I've gotten out of being highly sensitive is being able to be really someone who can be empathetic to people and not just sympathetic. And I always like the big difference between the two. I think it's so important. So, you do feel things from people. You do feel these, things that are unexpected, and at times you have to try to sort of analyze it too. But the other thing I do is I try to explain to people, I say, I would say almost all animals are highly sensitive beings. That high sensitivity is really an instinct. And it's, this fight, flight, or freeze idea, like, and people who say, my favorite is, does your dog bite? No, my dog doesn't bite, and then it bites someone.
Right. Yes.
What made it do that?
Yeah.
And so really, I always tell people we all have this thing, and when they don't believe me, like that, we give off energy. I always say, well, we typically have one thing in common in a family way, right? which is that, at least in the old days, I don't know with the new phones where it happens so much, where you're dialing your phone and the person you're dialing is already on the other line, and usually they're a close family member or someone you're close with.
Yes.
And it's like, how does that happen? The statistical probability of that happening is so unlikely that that's the amazing thing, is that that's when I try to explain to people. I say we are giving off things. We are communicating, and we know that these are possibilities because certain animals do. Dolphins communicate without talking, and all sorts of so again, then you have to convince people that we're just a higher animal, which is tough. So,
yeah, that doesn't come across too well.
Yeah, it's like, hey, you know what? But anxiety. I have 2 cats, and after 14 years, we still don't see them hardly at all because they're so full of anxiety and fight or flight and worry. And I say, this is where all this is buried. It's all buried in sort of this area, and I think, for me, that's why it happened. So those are techniques I think are helpful to help people understand maybe a little more.
Well, I used to do a lot of work with realtors, and I used to talk to them about energy, and it was really good because once I explained it, they got it. Because I would say, have you ever walked into a house, and you feel immediately the energy in there? So let's say that there's been a blazing row before you just walked in there. You feel that. You may not know what it is, but you feel, they say that you can cut the air with a knife kind of thing. You feel it when you walk in there. Or you might walk into a house where there's just so much love in that house, and it just feels really good the minute you walk in there. Well, you're picking up on the energy. And they understood that because they go into so many houses, and you can really tell the difference when you're going in, one after another. And that's the kind of thing. But it's like for highly sensitive people, that's every day, and everything. We're picking that up all the time.
Yeah, and you mentioned crowds before, and I think that's the commonality that all the people that I talk to now who, I think I'm highly sensitive, I feel highly sensitive. It's always around crowds, because it's really hard to explain, but when you have that many feelings, when that many things are coming at you, so you're not just hearing, like, it's very difficult to listen to a lot of conversations. I don't know if you have that problem too, but like I'm hearing everybody, but I'm also feeling them. I also feel like deep inside, there's something I'm feeling, and it's overwhelming because there's someone in the room who's not happy, and there's someone in the room who's might be very happy, or and a lot of just energy that I feel like I'm getting.
Well, that's right. And when you first, if you don't understand this concept and you're first really coming into experience it, you can leave that situation coming away from those people feeling like you felt fine when you went there, and then you come away feeling anger or sadness or whatever it is, and you tend to think it's yours. And what you may not realize is that those are things that you picked up from people who are there. So it's important to also know that when you are highly sensitive, you may well be picking up those emotions from other people. And when you walk away, to recognize that it is not yours. And so you can learn to leave that behind and not take it with you, which is important.
Yeah. So we have to take a quick break. But when we come back, I'd like to delve more into sort of the individual side of it, and how an individual who's highly sensitive can deal with, maybe things at work or in life that you've discovered are good tips for them. So if you'll hold with me for a second, Linda, we'll be right back with more Healthy You.
You're listening to Healthy University with Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome back to Healthy You. We're talking about being highly sensitive today, and I'm here with Linda Binns, who's an energy coach and an author. So welcome back, Linda.
Thank you, Alan.
So tell me, one of the interesting things that, and I know I said it, the other thing I discovered is I always felt like I was introverted, but I always felt like I had to be extroverted, and I like being extroverted. But what have you found? I think a lot of people think people who are highly sensitive, like stay to themselves or close themselves in, are introverts. What have you found?
That's not necessarily true. That being highly sensitive doesn't necessarily mean that you are an introvert. I know actually quite a few extroverted, highly sensitive people, which may sound odd, but some people are very sensitive to environment and to emotions and people around them, but they are actually energized and they feel really good around other people. The introverts have a much harder time being around, especially crowds of people. Might be okay one-on-one, but especially have a challenge with crowds of people. So it doesn't necessarily follow that all highly sensitive people are introverts. There are a lot of extroverted, highly sensitive people too, and I think it's important to be aware of that.
And do you find that people one group or another has a tougher time with it, or are there, like to me, it was really, really tough. And what one thing that is sort of unspoken, but somewhat true to me, is that sensitivity comes with, for me, a little bit of anger sometimes, or just being, sort of like I say, I had this bullying stuff, so I'm still left with like perceptions of threat when there's really no threat, and sort of feelings that I can be easily hurt, when people say things. So how do we deal with that? How do we?
Well, you asked, who has the harder time with it? Probably introverts have the harder time with it, although, again, it depends on your particular sensitivities and your level of sensitivities. But introverts have a tough time anyway because they find it harder to be out in the world generally, probably. But the anger that you said you experience, it's interesting to explore that, because there are several ways that can be coming about. It could be that you're picking up anger from other people. If the anger is yours, it can be, right from childhood. If you were never understood, it's really difficult growing up and never being understood and being told to get over it. Stop being so sensitive. Why can't you just be like everybody else? So if you grow up being told and kind of believing that, well, there must be something wrong with me because I'm not like everybody else, that can generate a lot of very deep internal anger, because you're not allowed, if you like, to be who you are. And in fact, you become totally disconnected from who you really are. And that, I have found, leads to a lot of very deeply buried anger, and that can surface from time to time. So yes, I think that can be true. And also, like you said, the fear. If you've been bullied in the past, I wasn't bullied at school, but I have been bullied in work environments in my teens and 20s, before I really started understanding the concept of all of this. And if you're living in fear about what somebody might say or might do, that can trigger some anger as well. So I can totally see where that comes from.
Well, and for me, what I tried to do, and when I wrote my memoir about those years, the thing I remember trying to do the most was to put on a mask, right? I wanted to try to be like everyone else. So there's this perception of like, oh, this is what everyone else is like, and they're not feeling this, so I'm going to try not to. And then you're fighting yourself. You end up in a war with your own self, which is, again, I think that anger, a lot of my anger comes from those years of not being what I now know as my authentic self, which is which is the most amazing thing. Like, for people who, think that they're too sensitive, and people say they're too sensitive, they need to explore that. But the other thing that I discovered and really needed to discover were the outlets. So I wasn't, using good outlets for dealing with high sensitivity, and the best one I found was sort of mindfulness activities where you learn to clear your head a little bit, where like meditation, where you're just by yourself, or yoga, even going to a yoga class. There's a lot of energy in those classes because pretty much everybody's there to get better from whatever it is they are dealing with. And so I get a lot of great feelings from those.
I think that's so important, because I think everybody needs to have tools to ground themselves and rebalance their energy. But for highly sensitive people, I think it's crucial to have something like that. To, the idea of, especially for those of us, and I think this applies to all highly sensitive people, certainly the ones I know anyway, we tend to be very analytical, but like you said, it's not a mental analytical, it's more of emotional analytical. And so but because of that, our minds are going constantly, and there's a lot of thought coming. So it's really important to have a mindfulness practice where you can quiet that mind, because quieting the mind quiets the body and is so beneficial. You need tools like that. You mentioned yoga classes. I have found, I love yoga, but I actually, and this probably is the introvert side of me, but I find it difficult to be in a large group, a large class. I can manage a very small class, or my preference is to do yoga at home by myself. And then I'm not influenced by the energy of other people. So yes, it's really important to find what that is for you. Meditation, yoga, even just a walk outside, just being in nature, any of those kinds of things.
Yeah, and paying attention to it. I think that's yes. The other aspect. A lot of people, say, "Oh, I walk," but it's learning to pay attention to the sounds, to the sights, to the smells. Yeah. It's all of that.
This isn't the walk with the with the headphones in your ears, listening to loud music or something. No, this is, it would be walking, like you said, listening to the sounds, listening to what's going on around you, doing whatever you do with complete awareness, putting all your attention on it. And that's what's going to help you the most, if you can develop that kind of conscious approach to things and that mindfulness practice.
And there was something else I just wanted to pass this by you, because I think I had mentioned it to Sharon, who introduced us. That one of the things that I always realized, like growing up, that was always weird to me, was that going back to sort of the animals, I've had all of these weird interactions with animals. So like I have a story, going to SeaWorld, and there's a dolphin tank, and every kid in there and every adult has their hand in there wanting to touch a dolphin, and I'm included, right? And I've always loved animals. I've always loved dolphins in particular. And I put my hand down, and this dolphin comes up and turns on its belly and lets me rub its belly, which immediately sends all these other people around me, and it immediately takes off. And I always thought to myself, that was a weird one. But a couple years ago, I went to Colorado, and we were able to go into a pen with wolves, and it was like very nerve-wracking. But we're in this pen with these wolves, and there's 5 of us, all doing the same thing. They give you some food, and this wolf, and this one wolf comes up to me at one point and starts rubbing my face. I actually have a picture of it. It's rubbing my face really hard with its face. And it's freaking me out, and it's not doing no one. And I'm like, okay, what do I do now? And the guide that was with us, she's like, it's scenting you. And I said, well, what does that mean? And she said, oh, it's telling the other wolves you're with it. It is you are part of its tribe, its tribe, and not to bother you. And it didn't do it with anyone else. And I always think I've had these experiences. And now I'm kind of equating it to this idea that I'm giving off energy, and the wolf is giving off energy, and so animals have that. Like I said, this is my belief that we're closer to a lot of animals with being a highly sensitive person. They sense that.
Oh, most definitely, because animals know you as energy. They just sense your energy, and so as a highly sensitive person, you have there's just so much more of a connection. My husband's always laughing at me because dogs will come up to me. Somebody will be out walking their dog, and the dog will make a beeline for me. To come over to me, and people's cats come to me and they'll say, well, it never goes to anybody, it always goes to hide when people come over, but they do. Animals sense energy. They know who you are as energy, and they will be drawn to that kind of energy. And that's where we get to the what's the blessing part of this. I see that as a great blessing.
Yeah, and I think people too. And I think so the other thing I've noticed that always threw me off, well, two things. One, you were talking about understanding emotion. So a couple of jobs I've had, we did instead of an IQ, an EQ, an emotional quotient. And I took this test, and it was supposed to go on for some weeks. You take the test, and you get the result, like Myers-Briggs, but for your emotions. And then it says, well, you're a lot like this, you're a lot like that, and then you get a call with a person who reads it, and they go, why do you think this is? And I was always like, well, it's because this happened to me and this, and I act like, and I have this feeling, and the person was like, well, we don't need to talk anymore. Versus other people who are like, I don't know, I don't know why. I feel like I've always known why I feel the way I do. I can't control it. I can't always say, well, gee, I can fix it, but I know why. I know why I feel this way. And I think that now, with the understanding of being an HSP, I understand where it comes from. So it wasn't just this thing that I imagined or that I thought maybe I was alone at. And I think that's been the real blessing for me, is finding out there's a world of people. And like you say, it's 20 or maybe close to 30%, but we don't talk about it because it's just not talked about. Like, culturally, a lot of people don't, share that stuff. And you go to certain countries and they don't share it at all.
Right.
I don't know how they get through life.
It's like the word feelings. The word sensitive is not a word people want to be associated with necessarily. And I have people who would choose any other word. They'll say to me, can we not find another word? I don't want to use that word sensitive. I don't want to be seen as being sensitive. But it's like, well, that's who you are. But have you ever felt also that times when you just know something very profoundly without necessarily knowing how you know it, just you know it, and people will say, well, how do you know that? And you say, well, I just do, and it seems very obvious to you, but it's not obvious to anybody else.
Yes.
Have you had that experience?
Oh, yes, yes. I mean, all the time, and it's always very funny. In a way, it's funny to me because at first I spent a lot of years frustrated. It's like, how can you not see this? How can you not understand this or feel this or sense this? And then, you realize, well, and that's when, again, I think you have to get into the whole blessing of it. Everything has a yin yang. And I mean, I think that's the realization, is that, with good feelings come bad feelings. With high sensitivity, there's good things to be sensitive about, and there's bad things to be sensitive about. So as part of that, how you were talking about work earlier. How do you deal with that? Like, the workplace is a tough place to be a sensitive person.
Yes.
So how do you talk to people about that?
Well, again, I think anybody, even as a highly sensitive person, you can handle any situation if you understand yourself at the deepest level. So self-awareness is huge, especially for highly sensitive people. Then once you know that, knowing what it is that you need. Now, I'm not saying you're necessarily going to get it in a work environment. So if you know that you need, an hour of downtime in the middle of the day, you might not necessarily get that. But when I think back, for example, to when I was working in an office environment, and bear in mind, I didn't know anything about any of this at the time, but I would feel compelled to, sometimes it would just all get too much, just the noise and the just everything going on around me. And I would just have to go, and I might go to the bathroom and sit there for 10 minutes, or I might, at lunchtime, just go and sit in my car. I just had to get away from it for a period of time, and then I could come back to it because I felt better with it. Also, helping people to understand what it is that you need. I can't do this way because it's not the best way for me to do it. If you want me to be most productive and efficient, this is how I need to do it. And it comes down to trusting ourselves too, because when you've grown up being told you're wrong because of the way you feel and the way you are, we have a tendency to not trust ourselves. But if we can develop that trust and know that, okay, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I know I need, so I have to make sure somehow, some way, I get this message across. And you just have to do it in a way that's very positive, that you make sure that you're not making anybody else wrong, for not understanding it or for not getting it right. But you just very clearly say, okay, this would be most helpful for me, and I could be more productive if I do this, or if I do it this way. Do you see what I mean? It's owning who you are is what I like to say. Well, really owning who you are.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I think, for me, like, I've never been able to sit at my desk for long periods of time. I have to get up and take a walk or do something, clear my head. But also, I think we gravitate towards certain jobs. Like I did media, because I fell in love with media. So I always say, these little podcasts that I do are like almost therapy for me because I get to release all of this, these thoughts and these emotions and these feelings with a lot of other people, many of which that I interview, like yourself, who also understand these things. And it's always interesting to me that discovery. Because I do, and people go, how can you be so curious about so many things? I said, I don't know, but I am. That's the other part that comes is, I care. I care about other people. So if they say something, I care, and
right.
And so I'm curious. I'm always like in the discovery mode, and so when I found high sensitivity, and when I found there were books on it, and then introduced to you, and there's people studying it and understanding it, and there's a huge amount of weight off my shoulders, I guess is what I like to say. And I think for other people, once they understand, yes, this is what it has been. It's not that there's anything wrong with you. My mom could never understand it, unfortunately, right. But I always knew it. I always knew, like, this is what I feel. This is what I am.
And I think there's a great deal of freedom to be had. We tend to be, we can be angry because our parents didn't understand, we didn't get what we needed growing up, all that kind of thing. But, the thing is, if we don't understand ourselves very much. And so it's really unfair when you think about it to have expected them to understand it, because we are different. And the only way people can understand it is if we help them. So I think when you get that, it also helps you to let go of a lot of that, they should have known, or they should have treated me differently, or, they just saw us as different and didn't know what to do with that. So if you can let go of that, there's a lot of freedom there.
And I think we're finally at sort of what I'll say is the dawning of understanding and acceptance of sort of emotional differences and mental health issues, and all of these things are starting to be discussed more openly. I think if the internet did nothing else, it allowed people to have a voice that didn't have a voice before on these issues.
True.
And so that's what I find so great, and I love now that I write. Like, I never thought, as a young person, I'd ever write anything worthwhile. And now, I can write for these sites that are very well thought of about these issues, and then I get, like I said, I get the feedback that I'm opening the door up for these people who have been hiding it for so long, And they're like,
Exactly.
I told my wife this is what it was, and nobody believed me, and what you just wrote is me, and that's really rewarding. So I have one more question for you, and then I'd love for you to be able to tell people about how they can get in touch with you. But I like to ask all my guests one question, and that's something that is probably something that you've already thought through as a person dealing with HSP. Is what habits have you changed in yourself to live a happier life? Like what would you say is the biggest habits you've changed?
The biggest habits, first of all, I would say making myself a priority, putting myself first. And, people, that was really hard for me initially because I was so focused on everybody else, like many people, and put myself last. And people see that as selfish. But what I've learned is that when you start putting yourself first, everybody benefits. You benefit not only yourself, but everybody around you as well. So that was a huge shift for me. Also, what you talked about earlier, mindfulness practice, just being present to whatever I'm doing. I used to be one of the queens of multitasking.
Yeah.
I can do so many things all in the same time, and now I won't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think very much about what is the energy I am bringing to this. And that's also where self-care comes in because, for example, I'm here talking to you. If I was distracted, if I was checking emails as I'm talking to you and, doing other things, I am not bringing 100% of my energy and my focus to you and to your listeners, right? And so that's not fair. It's not fair to me, and it's not fair to anybody who's listening. It's not fair to you. And so I've really learned how to make the most of my energy in that way, not only taking care of myself, but being fully present every moment.
Yeah, and it's work. I don't think that people understand both of what you said are things that you work at, and some days are great and some aren't. But particularly I so agree with the first thing you said in terms of like you really don't have the ability to help others if you don't help yourself first. You can't love someone else if you don't know how to love yourself. And I think a lot of people spend their time and probably a lot of HSP people, because of that sensitivity, because of that, tendency to be empathetic, lose themselves by trying to fight it and help others, think that that's really their calling. But their calling, I think, is to learn to help themselves, because once they do that, then it opens up this world of helping others once they understand that. So
Exactly.
I couldn't agree more with both of those. Thank you. So Linda, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show. So how can people get in touch with you, learn more about what you're doing? Obviously, you've got several books out, and how can people get your books and get in touch with you?
Well, I've always got a lot going on, so the best way to keep in touch and find out what I'm up to is to go to my website, which is lindabins.com. So that's LINDABINNS.com, lindabins.com. And, if this kind of stuff interests you, there's you can sign up for a freebie on my website, which will get you on my mailing list. I send out a weekly unstoppable energy tip every week. And also we'll share, with my people on my list, whatever's coming up, whatever workshops or new courses or anything that I have coming up. So the website's the best place to go.
Great. And I'll have your links up on my with the podcast so people can get to them very quickly. Well, I tell you, this was one of the shows that I was so excited to do because I finally got to talk about this HSP with another HSP, and wasn't just saying, "Hey, I feel this way," and people go, "Yeah, there's something to that." So I really appreciate your time and spending time with me and the Healthy You audience, and maybe we'll get to talk again and talk further.
So. Yeah, it's been my pleasure, Alan.
Well, thank you very much. And so this is Alan Eisenberg, and thank you for joining us on Healthy You.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.